AITA girl got pregnant and she and her parents want me to step up and help her raise her baby. I am not the dad. I told her no. I feel bad though. Alright, buckle up because this is going to be a bit of a roller coaster. I need to vent and get some perspective because this situation is like something out of a bad soap opera. I'm just a guy trying to figure life out, and now I feel like I've been thrown into someone else's mess. So here's the whole thing. First, a little backstory. There's this girl, let's call her Sarah. Sarah and I have known each other for years, pretty much since middle school. She's always been gorgeous, like the kind of girl who turns heads when she walks into a room. She was funny too, but also a little high maintenance, which I guess should have been a red flag. Anyway, back in the day, I had the biggest crush on her. I'm talking heart-pounding, can't speak properly when she's around kind of crush. But she never really saw me that way. I was the nice guy who was always there to help her out or cheer her up when some jerk broke her heart, but I never made it past the friend zone. Fast forward to now. We're both in our early 20s, and life has taken us in very different directions. I'm trying to figure out my path, working odd jobs. Sarah, on the other hand, has been living what I can only describe as a chaotic life. She's been in and out of relationships with guys who clearly aren't good for her, making one questionable decision after another. And that's where the drama starts. A couple of months ago, Sarah announced she was pregnant. The news hit like a ton of bricks, not just because it was unexpected, but because of what came next. The baby wasn't mine. Nope, it was from some random guy she had hooked up with, a guy I didn't even know she was seeing. From what little she told me, he was already out of the picture, vanished as soon as she told him the news. Typical deadbeat situation. The kind of guy who's all in for the fun but disappears the second things get real. I could hear the frustration in her voice when she talked about him, but honestly, I couldn't help thinking, what did you expect from a guy like that? I didn't say that, though. I just listened and tried to be polite. When she first told me, I didn't really know how to react. What do you even say to something like that? Congrats felt wildly inappropriate, like I'd be congratulating her on a problem she clearly wasn't ready to handle. But saying something like, wow, that sucks, felt equally wrong, too blunt, too cold. So I went with the safest option, something vague and non-committal. I think I said, well, I hope everything works out for you. Looking back, it probably sounded dismissive, but I was caught off guard and didn't know what else to say. I figured that would be the end of it, at least for me. I assumed she'd handle her situation and we'd go back to being casual acquaintances, the kind who occasionally like each other's posts on social media and exchange a "how've you been?" every 6 months. But nope. That's not how things went at all. A couple of weeks after her big announcement, she started messaging me, constantly. At first, it was pretty innocent. She'd ask how I'd been doing or bring up some old memory from high school. Stuff like, remember that time we got lost on the way to the football game? Harmless enough. And honestly, it was nice to hear from her. I mean, this was Sarah, the girl I'd spent years pining over. But then, things started to shift. The tone of her messages got weird. Subtle at first, but unmistakable. She started dropping little hints, like saying I was one of the only good guys she's ever known, or how she wished she had made better choices back in high school. Stuff like, you were always there for me. I should have appreciated that more. I'm not stupid, I knew what she was doing. It was like she was planting seeds, testing the waters to see if I'd bite. And yeah, part of me felt flattered. This was the girl I used to dream about, suddenly acting like maybe I'd been the one for her all along. But another part of me, probably the smarter part, was starting to feel uneasy. It didn't feel genuine. It felt calculated. Like she wasn't reconnecting with me because she missed me, but because she needed something. Or someone. Then came the bombshell. One night, out of the blue, she called me. I could tell right away that something was wrong because she was crying. Not the quiet, sniffly kind of crying, but full-on sobbing, like the world was ending. She said she was scared about the future, that she didn't know how she was going to raise this baby on her own. She went on and on about how lost she felt, how she didn't have anyone she could depend on. And then, almost as an afterthought, she dropped the real bombshell: she wanted us to be together. Like, together. She said I was the only person who had ever truly cared about her, and she needed someone like me in her life. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. She told me she wanted me to be the baby's father. Not biologically, obviously, but in every other way that mattered. She said I'd make a great dad, that I had all the qualities she wanted in a partner and a father. She started painting this picture of a future where we'd be a family, her, me, and this baby that wasn't mine. She talked about how we could move in together, how I could get a steady job and step up to help raise our child. And she said it all like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I should feel honored to be given the opportunity. At first, I didn't even know how to respond. I mean, part of me was flattered, I guess. This was the girl I'd had a crush on for years, practically begging me to be with her. But the other part of me, the rational part, was screaming, run. Run as fast as you can. So I told her I needed time to think about it, which was really just my way of avoiding the conversation. But it didn't stop there. Her parents got involved. Her dad, let's call him Mr. Smith, called me up one evening. Now, let me paint a picture of Mr. Smith for you. He's always been the type of guy who gives off that my way or the highway vibe. The kind of man who looks like he could fix a car with duct tape and pure determination, someone who prides himself on his old school, no-nonsense approach to life. I've always respected him, in a distant, you don't want to piss this guy off sort of way. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't unfriendly either. He'd shake your hand like he was testing your strength and expect you to meet his gaze without flinching. Over the years, I'd had plenty of interactions with him, just the usual small talk at school events or when I'd bump into Sarah's family somewhere, but we'd never had anything resembling a serious conversation. Until now. That evening, his voice came through the phone gruff and direct, wasting no time with pleasantries. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped. You know that feeling when you're about to get scolded by a teacher or your boss? It was like that, but worse. He started with a bit of background, laying out Sarah's situation in a tone that felt more like a courtroom argument than a conversation. He told me how scared she was, how overwhelmed she felt, and how important it was for her to have someone stable in her life right now. Then, without skipping a beat, he shifted gears and started talking about me. About how I'd always been a good kid, how I'd known Sarah for so long, and how I was the kind of guy who could step up and do the right thing. And then he hit me with the lecture. Full on, no holds barred. He told me, straight up, that real men step up. That Sarah needed someone to be there for her and the baby. That if I had any shred of decency or character, I'd man up and take responsibility for her and the child. He wasn't yelling, but his tone was sharp, almost cutting. He spoke with the kind of conviction that made it clear he wasn't just offering advice, he was telling me what he thought I had to do. It felt like I was being backed into a corner, like he was building a case against me and leaving no room for argument. I tried to interject, to remind him, gently, that this wasn't my child, that I wasn't the one who got Sarah into this mess. But he brushed it off like it was irrelevant. It doesn't matter, he said. What matters is that she needs help, and you're in a position to give it. That's what a real man does, he steps up when things get tough, even when it's not easy, even when it's not convenient. He said it like it was some universal truth, like it was written in stone somewhere. And for a split second, I almost started to feel guilty, like maybe he was right. Maybe I was being selfish. But then reality came crashing back. Here's the thing, though, I'm not responsible. This isn't my baby. I didn't make the choices that led to this situation. And no matter how much Mr. Smith wanted to twist the narrative, the simple fact was that I wasn't the one who screwed up here. I wasn't the one who made reckless decisions or got involved with someone who clearly wasn't going to stick around. That wasn't on me. And honestly, Sarah isn't exactly a walk in the park. She's demanding, impulsive, and, if I'm being brutally honest, kind of entitled. She's the kind of person who expects the world to revolve around her and throws a fit when it doesn't. I'd seen it before, countless times, and while I'd overlooked it back when I had a crush on her, now it was impossible to ignore. The idea of throwing my life away to take care of her and a child that isn't mine felt insane. Absolutely insane. When I told my dad about all this, he was furious. My dad's not one to hold back, and he doesn't sugarcoat things, ever. He listened patiently as I explained everything, Sarah's calls, her dad's lecture, the whole guilt trip they were trying to lay on me. And when I finished, he didn't even pause to think. Tell her to go, well, you figured out where. It was so blunt, so matter-of-fact, that I almost laughed. But he wasn't joking. Not even a little. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're too young to be saddled with this kind of responsibility. You'd be ruining your life if you got involved with her. Do you hear me? Ruining it. Her baby is not your responsibility," he said. "And I will be heartbroken if you throw away your dreams for this." Hearing him say that hit me hard because I could tell he was serious. He's always supported me, no matter what, but this time he was drawing a line in the sand. So I took his advice. I called Sarah and told her I couldn't do it. I told her I wasn't ready to be in a relationship, let alone take on the role of a father. She cried and called me selfish. She said I was just like all the other guys who had let her down. Her dad called me later and said I was a coward. It was a mess, but I stood my ground. Now, I'm dealing with the fallout. Sarah has been posting all kinds of passive-aggressive stuff on social media about how real men take responsibility, and how she deserves better. Her parents have made it clear they think I'm a terrible person. But honestly, I feel like I dodged a bullet. I'm not saying it was easy, part of me still feels guilty, and I do care about her. But I can't sacrifice my future for a situation that isn't mine to fix. Did I make the right choice? Or am I just as selfish as they're saying? I don't know. I just know I couldn't see a future where I was happy in that situation. Update 1. So, things were finally starting to settle down, or at least, that's what I thought. After the whole ordeal with Sarah and her dad trying to guilt-trip me into becoming her boyfriend and stepping up as the father of a baby that wasn't mine, I thought I had put the situation behind me. I stood my ground, told them I wasn't getting involved, and started focusing on my plans to enlist in the Marine Corps. My dad was proud of me. About a week after everything went down, I got a phone call. The number wasn't saved in my phone, but I recognized it. It was Sarah's dad, Mr. Smith. My stomach sank. I almost didn't answer, but a part of me thought maybe, just maybe, he was calling to apologize or at least to say they understood my decision. Spoiler, that's not what happened. When I picked up, his tone was completely different from the last time we spoke. He sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. Like he was calling to catch up with an old buddy or a long-lost relative. The first thing out of his mouth was, "How's it going, son-in-law?" I froze. Son-in-law. I thought maybe I misheard him, so I didn't say anything at first. But then he kept going, asking me how I was doing, how my family was, and if I'd started looking into better job opportunities yet. The whole conversation felt surreal, like I had been dropped into an alternate universe where none of the boundaries I set had ever existed. I finally managed to interrupt him and asked, point blank, why he was calling me son-in-law. He laughed, like it was some kind of inside joke, and said, "Well, you're going to marry my daughter soon, aren't you? Might as well get used to the title now." I was stunned. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to process what he had just said. Marry his daughter? Where on earth did he get that idea? I hadn't agreed to anything. In fact, I had explicitly told both Sarah and him that I wanted no part of this situation. I wasn't dating Sarah, I wasn't stepping up as the father of her child, and I definitely wasn't planning to marry her. I tried to stay calm as I asked him where he got the idea that I was going to marry her. His tone shifted slightly, becoming more matter-of-fact, like he was explaining something so obvious it didn't need to be questioned. He told me that they had already made the plans. According to him, Sarah needed stability, and as her parents, they had decided that I was the best person to provide it. He talked about how they didn't want her living at home with a baby for the next 18 years, how they wanted her to move on with her life, and how they believed I was the solution to all of her problems. He said it as though I was some kind of knight in shining armor who had already agreed to ride in and save the day. The whole thing was presented as a done deal, like my consent didn't even matter. At that point, I felt my blood boiling. I told him flat out that I hadn't agreed to any of this and had no intention of marrying Sarah or taking on the responsibility of her child. I reminded him that I had already made it clear I wasn't getting involved. But instead of backing off, Mr. Smith's tone turned cold. He told me that they had made their decision, and it wasn't about what I wanted, it was about what Sarah and the baby needed. He said I had a moral obligation to step up because I was the only person in her life who could do it. It was the same guilt-tripping nonsense from before, only this time, he wasn't just asking me to be her boyfriend, he was outright demanding that I marry her. And then, things took a darker turn. He started making threats. He told me that if I didn't go along with their plan, he would have no choice but to involve the authorities. At first, I was confused. What could he possibly go to the police about? I hadn't done anything wrong. But then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. He implied that he could make things difficult for me legally if I didn't cooperate. I immediately pushed back, telling him that he had no right to involve the police because the child wasn't mine. I hadn't been in a relationship with Sarah, I hadn't slept with her, and I certainly hadn't done anything to make me legally responsible for her or her baby. But that didn't stop him. He said it didn't matter. He started ranting about how he could claim I had made promises to Sarah, how he could twist the situation to make it look like I had abandoned her when she needed me most. He even hinted that he could spread rumors or make accusations that would damage my reputation. The whole thing felt like blackmail, like he was trying to scare me into submission by any means necessary. I was in shock. This man, who I had always thought of as tough but fair, was now trying to manipulate and threaten me into taking on a responsibility that wasn't mine. It was insane. I couldn't believe the lengths he was willing to go to just to offload Sarah and her problems onto me. The more he talked, the clearer it became that this wasn't about me or Sarah or even the baby, it was about him and his wife not wanting to deal with the situation themselves. They didn't want the burden of helping their daughter raise her child, so they were trying to force that burden onto me. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to marry Sarah, I wasn't going to play daddy to her baby, and I wasn't going to let him bully me into giving up my life to clean up their mess. He kept pushing, but I stood my ground. Eventually, I hung up on him because I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I was going to explode. I couldn't believe what had just happened. After that call, I felt completely drained. I knew this wasn't the end of it, I could tell from the way he talked that he wasn't going to give up easily. But I also knew I wasn't going to let him or anyone else dictate my life. One thing was certain, I wasn't going to let them steamroll me into a life I didn't want. Not now, not ever. Update 2. So, after that ridiculous phone call with Sarah's dad, the one where he started calling me son-in-law and tried to strong-arm me into marrying his daughter, I realized I was dealing with people who had absolutely no sense of boundaries. I thought saying no to them outright would be enough, that my clear refusal would put an end to the madness. But as the days went on, I realized just how determined they were to rope me into their mess. They weren't going to let it go, and I had to take serious steps to protect myself. It started with the calls and messages. After I hung up on Mr. Smith, I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, my phone started blowing up, texts, voicemails, missed calls, you name it. Not just from him, but from Sarah and even her mom. I swear it was like they were running a coordinated campaign to wear me down. The messages ranged from guilt trips, you're abandoning Sarah when she needs you most, to outright threats, if you don't step up, there will be consequences. Some of them were so outlandish they almost felt comical, but the sheer volume of it was overwhelming. And it didn't stop there. Sarah started tagging me in posts on social media, these long, dramatic rants about how she deserved better and how real men take responsibility. At first, she was vague, but it didn't take long for her to start using my name. She painted me as the bad guy, claiming I'd promised to be there for her and was now backing out. Of course, none of it was true, but that didn't stop her friends and random people from jumping into the comments to attack me. It was like being dragged into a public trial where I wasn't even allowed to defend myself. And as if that wasn't enough, her parents got in on the action too, posting these passive-aggressive status updates about how some people aren't man enough to handle responsibility. I knew I couldn't just ignore it. These people weren't just crossing lines, they were bulldozing over them. So the first thing I did was block them all on social media. Sarah, her mom, her dad, gone. No more posts, no more tags, no more DMs. I went through every platform I use, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn, and made sure they couldn't contact me. It felt good, like I was taking back a little bit of control. But I knew that wasn't enough. These weren't the kind of people who would take no for an answer, and I had to cut them off completely. Next, I blocked their phone numbers. All of them. I went through my call history and made sure every single number they'd ever used to contact me was blocked, Sarah's cell, her parents' cells, even their home phone. At first, I worried that I was overreacting, but after everything they'd already pulled, I didn't want to take any chances. I even went a step further and changed some of my privacy settings so they couldn't find me through mutual contacts or try to reach me from unknown numbers. For a couple of days, it was blissfully quiet. No calls, no texts, no notifications. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd gotten the message. But then, a letter showed up in my mailbox. A handwritten letter. From Sarah. I didn't even read the whole thing. I could tell from the first few sentences that it was more of the same, guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and a desperate attempt to drag me back into her life. I tore it up and threw it in the trash, but that letter was the final straw for me. Blocking them wasn't enough. I needed something more concrete, something that would legally force them to stay away. That's when I decided to pursue a restraining order. At first, I didn't even know if I could get one. I mean, it's not like they'd physically threatened me or shown up at my house, yet. But when I spoke to a lawyer about the situation, they assured me that I had a case. The sheer volume of unwanted contact, combined with the threats and public harassment, was more than enough to justify taking legal action. So I started the process. For those of you who've never gone through it, getting a restraining order isn't as simple as filling out a form and having it granted on the spot. There's a process, and it takes time. First, I had to gather evidence, screenshots of the texts and social media posts, records of the calls, even the letter Sarah had sent me. Then, I had to file a petition with the court and explain the situation in detail. I'll admit, it was nerve-wracking. The idea of standing before a judge and airing out all this drama was not something I was looking forward to. But I knew it was necessary. While the permanent restraining order is still in progress, there's a hearing coming up soon. I was granted a temporary one almost immediately. And let me tell you, that was a huge relief. The temporary order prohibits Sarah and her parents from contacting me in any way. No calls, no texts, no emails, no letters, no showing up at my house, and no sending other people to contact me on their behalf. If they violate it, the sheriff's deputies will be knocking on their door to escort them to the local jail. Knowing I had the law on my side made me feel like I could finally breathe again. Since then, things have been quiet. I haven't heard from Sarah or her parents, and I'm hoping it stays that way. But I'm not letting my guard down. These are the kind of people who don't take no for an answer, and I wouldn't put it past them to try something else. For now, though, I'm focusing on moving forward with my life, on my own terms, without the weight of their expectations dragging me down. If you're ever in a situation like this, let me give you one piece of advice: set boundaries and enforce them. Don't let anyone guilt-trip you into sacrificing your happiness or your future for a problem that isn't yours to fix. And if they can't respect your boundaries, don't hesitate to take legal action. Your peace of mind is worth it.